I'm going to read this passage in Romans. It's in another letter that Paul writes. And this letter in Romans that Paul writes is an entire chapter here where he's basically saying, expanding on this whole idea, I got an urgent thing to get along. So not only is it the church in Corinth that needs to learn this, but apparently the church in Rome does too. And if you read Galatians, they did too. And Ephesians, they did too. And it kind of was a theme. Look at this. This is what Paul says, and I'm going to read from the Message Bible because it's just more blunt and more plain to today's language. He says this in Romans 14, verse 1. Welcome with open arms, fellow believers who don't see things the way you do. Doesn't say just welcome with open arms, fellow believers. He doesn't. No. He says welcome those who don't see the same thing, see things the way you do. Well, that's a way to start it, isn't it? Come on. In other words, what he's saying is loving one another doesn't mean agreeing with one another. That loving one another doesn't necessarily mean we have to agree with one another. He's saying you got to welcome with open arms, not just half, yeah, I love you. Welcome with open arms those who don't see things the way you do. Then he goes, he says, and don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you don't agree with. Even when it seems, I like this, even when it seems that they are strong on opinions, but weak in the faith. Isn't this what we think? Come on. When someone disagrees with us, it doesn't matter what side of the coin you're on. When someone disagrees with you, you're thinking they're strong in opinions, but they don't have as strong a faith as you. That's why they believe differently than you. They don't have, but the funny thing is that they're thinking the same thing about you. Right? Come on. Then he says this. Remember, they have their own history to deal with. Very insightful. So treat them gently. Here's the thing. Our differences are usually fueled by divergent life experiences rather than divergent IQ levels. Let me break that down. The reason why people think differently is because they've had different life experiences than you. Okay, we're not getting it yet. The reason why people vote differently is because they have different life experiences than you, not because their IQ level is different. Now we're getting it? Okay? The reason why people have a different understanding of Scripture than you do, theology than you do, is because they have a different background than you do, and not because their IQ or their faith level is different than yours. This is what Paul's saying. So he says you got to understand that somebody might have a pain in the past or an experience in the past or something in the past that is different than yours, which is why they see things different than you. So what does he say? Treat them gently. In other words, there might be a pain. All of us have a pain in the past that has driven us to a belief system or a way of thinking that has triggered something that we are either self-protective, or we're just completely ignored it, or we drove down a different path to avoid that pain again. All of us have that. So when we pick on somebody because they think differently than us and not realize that they have a different life experience than us, then what happens is we trigger that pain point, which creates more separation. So what Paul's saying is like, take it gentle, take it gentle. Take it gentle, because oftentimes, before we can agree, we need to love.